Hi, here's a hint for writing a great response to question 3 or question 5 in your procedure. By the way, questions 3 and 5 are both the how questions. And so I'm looking for details on how you are going to measure um, the car when you're measuring its velocity, when you're trying to find out its velocity. So what most of you are talking about is something like this. Most of you are talking about taking the car and putting it down on the floor and maybe starting it off here. Okay. And most of you are talking about saying that you have a starting position, right? Maybe it's 0 meters, something like that. And then a lot of people in their procedures are saying something like this. They're saying, well, let the car drive a certain distance. Maybe, I don't know, go out to 5 meters, for example. And this would be kind of where you would stop. Okay. So the thing would be is if that's your experiment, then you have to know exactly where to start and stop timing the car. So if you start timing the car here where I first drew, the question is where do you stop timing the car? Okay, so if the car is moving, to the right, do you stop timing here, right? In other words, when the front bumper of the car reaches the 5 meter marks, is that where you stop? Or do you let the car go further and do you wait until its back bumper crosses that line? So it's kind of like which one should you do, right? And I don't know if you thought about that, but you should think about it now because it makes a difference, right? Um, if the car goes all the way out to the second position here, it's going to take a little more time, right? And it also drives a little more distance. So you have to know which one of these to go with. I'm going to give you options here. So do you go with A or do you go with B? So I'm going to just ask you to pause, right, and think, where should you stop? If the car is supposed to go 5 meters, which one is the right one? Okay. So the answer to this question is you want to go with A. In other words, if you start timing the car with its front bumper lined up with the origin, if you do that, right, then you want to stop timing and you want to use the same point of reference on the car. So you want to use the front bumper of the car. And the reason is think about it. How far does the front bumper itself go in that whole trip? And so if you were to track the front bumper, right, and just look at it, that front bumper is going to go exactly 5 meters, which is what you want, okay? Um, if you wait for the car to get into position B, right, if you wait for the second position, that's no good because the car drives an extra distance in that time. Can you see that the car is going to drive extra distance? And so it's going to drive, extra distance. And that distance would be equal to the length of the car, right? So you'd have to add on however many centimeters this is. And you probably don't want to do that because that makes your procedure kind of complicated. So don't do this, okay? But be purposeful and be consistent. So if you start with measuring the car using the front bumper as the marker, make sure that you're consistent and you stop timing when the front bumper reaches the ending point on the floor. Guys, the same logic applies. Maybe your experiment is a little bit different. Maybe instead of setting the distance to 5 meters, maybe instead you're setting the time to say 10 seconds, right? And you want to measure how far does the car go. So you've got to measure the distance, right? And again, if that's your experiment, if your experiment involves setting the time, you set that and you measure the distance, again, make sure that you are using kind of the front bumper of the car to get the time, okay? Don't do the front bumper for one and the back bumper on the other end of the distance because that will give you, the wrong distance. So the distance we want here is actually, correct that, the distance goes from here to here. That's the proper distance that you want, okay? So please, please, please do yourself a favor, talk about this, and either in question 3 or in question 5.